an extremely Tlingit household, meaning it was the primary language of the household, which was really an incredible experience. It's an extremely rare thing now to have a household where Tlingit is even, not even to say a primary language, but let's just say 50-50. There's maybe one place in Angoon, there might be a couple of houses in Tesla. Those are kind of the only ones I know of. There certainly might be others. But it's just talking to people who work in the language a lot and trying to think about it. And it's a wonderful collection. So many different things you can go in here and just grab and goof around with. There's a version of this online on tlingit.info. If you wanted a version to carry around, or to put on your iPhone or your tablet or your computer, you can just download them there, and it's pretty handy because it has an interactive table of contents, so you can look stuff up pretty fast. I'm a big fan of having the printed versions because it supports the programs. These programs, they don't make any money off of these, but they also pay for the printing costs. But then they also, make them for language learners, so they're usually really good about letting people download them as well. And the audio for the phrases is on the CD, and it's also on the Sealaska Heritage Institute website. If you were to Google Sealaska Heritage Institute, and then you go to their website, which I think is sealaskaheritage.org, and then you go under Programs and Language Resources, you'll see a whole bunch of things there, including, well, let's go there, because it's fun. So I am sharing the screen. If you have internet access on the phone, you might check it out as well. So sealaskaheritage.org, that brings us here. And then here is programs, and under programs, we go down to language and culture and language resources. And we've got a number of different things here. Here's the Tlingit dictionary, the Haida dictionary, a link to these incredible puppet shows made in the late 1960s. We'll watch one of them maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Valentine phrases, and then they did a phrase of the week thing for a while with Johnny Marks while he was working there. So here's, this was in 2006, and there's just a whole series of phrases. Most of them are sort of season specific as well. So, let's put the branches in the water. That's audio.
How tani hintaye nachtu. How tani hintaye nachtu.
And so that's a special type of branch that you'd be using to gather herring eggs. So there are also very culturally specific phrases on here. When you get into March, gold medal basketball tournaments, there's a few. Let's go to the game. I'll see you at the game. Frank went to Huna. Thank you for making me laugh. So there's some really great phrases on here. And so my recommendation with stuff like this is just to find things that are interesting to you, that you think you want to commit to memory, especially if you find ones that you can really learn how to use. And that's what we're going to do with these phrases here. And so it's a wonderful website. There's also, if we go down, there's clan names, links to the Harry Eggleston's verb work, which we should look at as well. There's a Tlingit verb database that exists on so if you go to gold.heritage.org/verbs, it brings you to this page. And this has over 575 verbs that are conjugated in a wide variety of ways. So when we learn to spot verbs in Tlingit, we look them up by the verb root. We can also look them up by English here. So if you said, well, I want to know awake. And so you click here and it brings you to the verb. And it shows you these different verb forms. And so these are what we call verb modes. There are different modes in Tlingit. And the nice thing is that they're conjugated for you here. So now you could say, I kept her awake. I didn't keep her awake, or him or her. And then you can just start learning how to say some things. And it's an amazing resource. It's an amazing resource because conjugating verbs is really hard. And so one thing you can do is you can just grab them up here and then start to sort of look for patterns. And as we go further along, it'll start to make more and more sense. So again, it's goldbeltheritage.org/verbs. And that brings you here. There's all kinds of different questions you might have once you get here. But it's up to you as a language learner. Sometimes you want to just say, oh, I just want to focus on these nouns that we have. I want to focus on these phrases that we were working on. But then sometimes, if we're doing 4 hours a week here, you should be doing 8 hours a week outside of this class at least. And so part of it could be finding things to repeat. Some of it could be listening to things. Some of it could be just spending some time reading about some things. And there's a few different things here on the left-hand side that are really good reading material. There's also links on Alaska Heritage to her dissertation, which talks about these verb modes and how to get there. It's an amazing resource. Other fun things, we'll look at one thing, and then we'll move along to our phrases for the day. We had a Tlingit language immersion. I think this thing's going to growl at me if it goes. We don't have the flash player. Okay, it's probably going to growl. So we were in Jinkat Yagi Kanakaya Akhowe has Tuwahe Ayurhatangitin Kanach Hoots Kani Howe Uhan the Kat Yagi which is a team of hoots. Akhankaya way to Hitak. Ya Hitkaya Jihyach. Atuk Ayeshetehin Ha'atchad. Techiltim Ha'abwe Chahat. Yahuts. Kanachashetim. About Ya Hideshu Watan We Chahat. Hishwasa Padlak away Hishwatim. Shetehini Atcha. Dasa Wachapa. Skittles. Kanakawelcha. Kinuxi Atchakisai. Like Hakinak Bleach Ayayi was Saki Kanakata. Kakde with the good to Katiki. Aka Hinikaya Wadu. Kayes Beef the Kate. Atilchaway Kot. Anj Kahini. Kekne Anj Kahini. Yet, quite Kunach Kawa Chuck. Yahoos. Hedeshu Watanwe. Beef the Katie. Adachaway the Kataway Anj Kahini. The Jen Tinaya Kunach. Ataya Dina. Okay. Maka we quit to Panachia. Naka Ataya. Hanak hain hain kusti qahtain kinristi qilhne seteya ha Hanak ukeya ha Hanak kashit ayayata bear barometer. We were in Haines. We're at a Tlingit immersion camp for 10 days. It was only Tlingit. Tremendous fun. But we were really among the brown bears. They're all over the place. And we see them every day. They came into our shed where we kept all of our food. And like there was some thing that was supposed to keep them out, but it was too strong. They just ripped it right open. And we went in and just like ate. There's all this food. And out of all the food, it ate a whole bunch of Skittles. It ate all the Skittles and drank this big thing of bleach.
Drank the bleach?
Yeah, it was like, that thing's got to be dead or grumpy or. It came back. And it's
Like that was good bleach.
It's like that's how you wash your Skittles down, I guess. And then, so then it was the hardware store. Fortified that building. But then we had a metal garbage can down in the river to keep it cold, and we had orange juice and eggs in there. Nora's orange juice, and I got the lid off, and I took the orange juice out, squished it, and drank it all up. And it had this big flat of eggs, they're all just stacked up these little pallets. Squished the whole color.
Oh my gosh.
So Nora, she wrote a poem about her orange juice, the eggs. And then Ruth Demrick made this thing. It was really fun to watch her. So this is on sealaskaheritage.org. If you go //bearometer, BEAROMETER.SWF. And we'll just watch it for a second. Those of you online, you'll hear the Tlingit, but I'll read. I think there's English on that one. There's a picture of a bear here, a guy with sunglasses. It says, when his fur is dry, the weather is good. When his fur is wet, it's spring. When his fur is blowing, it's wind. When his fur is white, it is snowing. When his fur is frozen, it's really cold. When his fur is standing up, run away fast. Doesn't matter how the weather is. It was a very fun thing, and to see her make this while we're there, we're all laughing. And the language immersions were fun. All this fun stuff happens in the language. We just laughed so hard about a wide variety of things. Some of them were just sort of silly, funny like this. Some of them were just circumstantial. So these old ladies, we all go berry picking, and it's our elders that we're all ready to go, and they're just like picking like crazy. But there's a group of them that go off with someone else who's trying to get some Tlingit phrases for berries, and they're all just laughing so hard. And later I was like, what are you laughing about? And they're trying to get some berry, but it all came out so funny. And if you knew Johnny Marks at all, you'd always find like the funniest things to talk about. They would, so the phrases that they were looking for were about berry picking, but just like the sequence was like, is it ready? Touch it. Is it hard? Pull on it. And so they just started getting really kind of dirty, and they were just laughing, and then Who knows what else they were learning over there? It was awful. A lot of fun. Okay. So, going through this phrase book, there was a request to look at numbers. We'll go ahead and look at numbers. So if you download it on tlingit.info, it looks like this, except it doesn't have this person's name in it. So it's broken down into these sections over here. And so it's really a fantastic thing because it helps you just really get into a conversational mode. In fact, what I would like to happen, we have 2 online on the computer, we have 1 on the phone, and then I think we have 7 regularly in the room on YouTube, so 9. I don't know how, I'd like to pair folks off, and let's say a week from now, just using the phrases that are already written down in here, just pick some to arrange into a short conversation. So that's all you gotta do is pick them and then go up and read them in front of everybody and the universe, and have a little bit of emotion, so you're not wasa yeti. Right, so you got a little bit of feel in it. You don't have to I think I took it to the extreme one time. People were really busting out their acting skills, which is fun. You don't have to, but you just want to sort of feel the things from, and think of things you can arrange to sort of make a short story. And we've done these with puppets before. I've got puppets if you want to do puppets instead of your own voices. Sounds entirely up to you. It would be very short. Huh?
Oh, I was just thinking that'd be cool with the puppets.
You do that. I'll bring them in. Set a little stage here. And then, yeah, so it's really short. Maybe 10 sentences altogether would be fine. So really short, just to sort of, but that way you're getting some, a feel for some of these. So let's figure out, I know we're missing a couple today. I think we might have 10 actually, that might work perfectly. I do some Keshian. Shubateen.
Routine is on the phone.
That's it.
Your routine is on the phone.
Okay, so you're on the phone, good. Who's, it's and then, Hokja. I think there's only 2 there. So here's another interesting thing, but it's good that you brought up numbers. And we'll take a look at numbers in a second. Payout. So we might have 3. If we end up with 3, that's totally fine. One thing that they found is, say whatever your first language is, in a lot of cases, and then you go somewhere and you learn another language. Let's say you were born in Germany, you can speak German, and then you came to America, you learned English. If you had to count something really fast, we'd usually do that in German. Even if you had lived here for 20 years, hadn't spoken very much German. Unless you totally just lose the language, which happens. So a good thing to practice to just sort of help yourself think in Tlingit as well is to count things in Tlingit. And then one thing that I learned as well, we talked about yesterday, you're now qualified to play Go Fish, right? Once we get counting down and a couple other things. The other thing is when you're learning how to do your counting in Tlingit, what we found is we all got really fast at counting to 10, but we had memorized this sequence of words, right? And we could just say them really fast. But then we played cribbage in Tlingit, and it was really hard because then we had to count by different. And so this, cribbage is another game called 99, which is really fun in Tlingit. And what we'll do is we'll look at some interjections too. We'll throw those in there next week. because they're really fun. And interjections are what you say when you need to communicate something really quickly. Right? Like, gee, right? And what does that mean? Right? How do you translate that? And so they can be tough to translate at times. There's a whole bunch of them that could be like, I'm teasing you or I'm really disappointed. There's a whole bunch of them. Okay, so let's
Is
say.
there different ways to count in Tlingit? Like in Shmel, there's how many people are at our potlatch or how many gifts are at a potlatch? Is there different steps like that?
Yes, so there's counting people, and then there's counting how many times something happens. Those are the three different ways of counting, and they would be done differently. We'll take a look at those. There's an old style of counting that people don't use anymore. It's shifted to a sort of a newer style, and we'll take a look at that as well. And then just generally, it seems like a long time ago, Tlingits counted up usually to about 20, and then if it was beyond 20, it was just sort of a bunch. Like, there was not a real need to count. And you might have, if you were distributing things at Kuki and you need to make sure everybody had one, then you'd probably do that. But in a lot of cases, you would just sort of, you could just, so like the other thing that we're finding is often with speakers is, you know, in English you'd say 1 cat, 2 cats, 3 cats. So as soon as you went more than one, you would also pluralize the noun. Tlingit, you can pluralize the noun, but it seems like it's optional. You could say douche, kek douche, dech douche, nask douche, and it doesn't matter. It's still, you would pluralize it when there's too many to count. Right? That's when you would put the plural marker on there. So if we were speaking English, we'd say 1 cat, 2 cat, cats. I don't want to count them, there's a whole bunch of them. Okay, let me get to the numbers section. I'm going to choose for asking questions. You can always ask questions. So the way I saw Kashkavu, who we lost earlier this year, I saw him count, and in my mind it goes one of two ways. But basically, as you're counting, your hand goes up with all your fingers pointing upwards, and then your index finger drops. And then you say, play, play. And this is page 51, you guys want to follow along. Play, 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 play. And then you drop your middle finger. So you've got your hand with basically all fingers up, but then the first 2 fingers are down. Dech, 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 dech. And you drop the ring finger. Shayapapu. Nutsk, 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 nutsk. And you drop the pinky, and so your thumb is just poking out and your hand is up. Dakhun, 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 dakhun. And one hand up with your fist closed. Keijin, 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 keijin. And that, so K is upward and Jin is hand. So it's like a hand up. Right, so that's how that, so once you get to 5, and you see it's sort of a base 5 kind of system where it goes by 5. So then with that hand up with the fist closed, you would raise the other one in the same way, drop the index finger, Cheich is what you call it, and you'd say play do shu, 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 play do shu. And you'll drop the index finger, or the middle finger, dacha do shu, 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 dacha do shu. Drop this, the ring finger, nutska do shu, nutska do shu, nutska do shu,
Naskadushu,
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 Naskadushu.
Naskadushu,
And you drop the pinky, and so you've got your thumb poking out, two hands up. Gushuk,
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 gushuk.
Gushuk,
And then you clasp both hands together. Jinkan,
Jinkad,
jinkan,
Jinkad,
jinkan,
Jinkad,
jinkan.
Jinkad.
So like, I'm trying to remember how we said it too. So you notice you've got kleg, deg, nach, nask. Then you also have klegdushu, dakadushu, natskadushu. So it was, remember how we said it? Oh, it's like going over to the other side of it or something.
Yeah, I kind of remember seeing that video.
No, I'll show video, but it's something along the lines of 1 and a half, or 1 and what's on the other side, 2 and what's on the other side, 3 and what's on the other side. Ushuk is whoosh, whooshu, contraction of the thumb is smiling when you get to 9, and jinkan is the hands together. So it's really neat, and then when you can get up, you can keep going from there. Jin, kat, kek. So just start, and then you go ka, so it's 10 and 1, 10 and 2, up to 20, which is kek ka. We say kek ka,
Play ka,
kek ka,
play ka,
kek ka.
play ka.
So that's a contraction of kek ka, one person, 10 fingers, 10 toes. There's 20. When you're counting how many times something occurs, kledahin is once, kledahin,
Kledahin,
dachdahin,
Dachdahin,
dachdahin.
Dachdahin.
So that's twice. Oops. And then nasgidahin,
Naskadahin,
nasgidahin,
Naskadahin,
dakhundahin,
Dachundahin,
dakhundahin.
Dachundahin,
And then when you're counting people, it's kleinach,
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 dachnach,
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 natskinach,
Naskinach,
natskinach.
Naskinach,
And then you can also count, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 2. So that's the basics of counting in Tlingit, and we'll do it a few times in here. What I like to do is say, there it is. There's one more thing you guys can go study. And then sometimes we'll just go around the room and we'll just count 10 by 1s. You would just say whatever number you're at. Questions? Very good.
I had a question. So you were talking about if you had a previous, like if this isn't your second language, then, because I've noticed like I'll take notes and I'll revert back to a non-English language that I know. Is that pretty normal?
Yeah, it probably is. So if you know a language, and then this, I was studying, this happened when I studied Haida. I would end up, I would read the Haida and then read the English and then think about it in Tlingit. And I did the same thing when I tried to learn Spanish.
Yeah.
I was also trying to learn Haida, and I was like, I'm not going to follow. And so it's pretty common that your brain will start going for these multiple languages. I'm not sure what happens once you sort of get along where you're actually just thinking in Tlingit. And I do know people who speak Tlingit, Haida, Japanese, Russian, English. Yes, I know people who speak Tlingit among several other languages. And so the big question with any language is, can you encounter it enough that you can actually engage in the language? Because there's a lot of people who know about Tlingit. You're like, oh yeah, well it's got, I can count, and I know I can name these things, something I know about verbs, but then if you try to engage them in the language, it won't go. And so that's the thing about language learning, is making sure that all these little pieces are adding up to some form of fluency at the end. But yeah, it'd be interesting, and I would recommend for all of you guys, and I don't know if I've even talked about this at all, but you should keep a language journal so that, and my recommendation is whatever it is, I'm a fan of these little pocket things, but make it just for language. Don't put like your grocery lists and other things in there. And then when you fill it up, just put it away. And this is where you take notes on what you're learning in the language, take some guesses on how some things might work, keep track of the different types of words you're learning, different types of exercises you're doing in the language. Because it's actually really fun to go back and look at that stuff. So every now and then I look at my old notebooks. I'll say, oh, man, I remember when I learned that word, or I remember when I learned how this phrase and these concepts work. And look at all these things; they're all so wrong, right? But it's fun to sort of have a place to track that progress. And I think it's important too, because then that's probably the place where you can write down some of these things, and that actually might be really useful for teachers of any languages at some point in the future. Is how do people acquire these languages? Because the bottom line is we've probably run 300 or 400 people through all of these classes, and there's maybe 5 or 6 that can just move into the language and stay there. So I think we're going to end up with higher rates than that, but historically it's been the case. Anything else?
In that video you showed us when she, in the bear video, the I yelled a T, the A was separated from the yelled T.
This is a typo. Yeah. So where that A is in a yelled T, it's in what we call, so for Tlingit, in English, verbs want to go subject, verb, object, right? I talked to you, I ate cheese, you made coffee, right? So that's the order it wants to go. It also has pronouns are sort of optional, right? So it could be I made it, or I made coffee, or, and so we can substitute things in readily, and then the pronoun just goes away. So a couple of things to keep in mind with Tlingit is, one is the pronoun is always there. You're best to think of it as always being there. So you would say, I made it coffee, right? I told you your name, or whatever, right? So even if there's specifics in there, specific nouns instead of pronouns, the pronouns are always in there. They're always built into the verb. The other thing to keep in mind is it goes object, subject, verb. It's non-negotiable. With English, it's negotiable, right? So I could say, I made the coffee. I could say, that's the coffee I made. Right? So this I can alter it. And sometimes we do that to shift the way the language functions. If we're doing creative writing or something like that, we might mess around with it a lot. With Tlingit, it has a pretty specific word order with a lot of things. There are things that can move around, but when it comes to verbal structure, it can go object, subject, verb. So then the object marker is first, and then the subject marker is there. So if I say, ich sechan, I love you. Ich is you, cha is me, sechan is the verb. Ich sechan. So when you start listening for Tlingit and using Tlingit, you're keeping that word order in mind. Now in that object pronoun spot, there's a couple of things that can just sort of lock it up. One is pu. So if we say puwati, that's how the weather is. And that's locked up. You can't put an object pronoun in there, but it appears in that same area. The other one is which can be confusing. As we get to learn pronouns later, the third person pronoun is a zero. So there's nothing for the third person, right? So I'd say, if I were to speak English using Tlingit grammar, I'm cutting fish, you're cutting fish, cutting fish. That's how it would conjugate, right? And so the other thing would be, I'm pushing myself, I'm pushing you, I'm pushing. And so there's no third person in either the subject or the object. It's what we call a zero marker. But if you had a third person object and a third person subject, he's pushing him, then the object would change to an A. Otherwise, it's impossible to tell that there's two things. But there is this thing called A-themed, where an A just pops up and it's always there. And that's what you have in a Yaudati. A steak is to fish, a kabech is to dance. And that A is always there. And it's just something you'll encounter as you sort of get further along. You okay?
What is to dance again?
A,
How do you spell that?
A-L apostrophe E-I underline X. There's a wonderful video. If you go to uas.alaska.edu, there's a conversation, and there's these conversations that are there. Let's go there real quick. So thinking about different ways we can engage in language. Here's the home page for UAS. And down in the bottom right, there's this little box. I don't know what they call this thing, but it has these buttons that you move left or right. And if we keep going, there's Shermeen, yeah. There's one that says, Wush in ayam ukhatute. We're having a conversation, conversing. If you click on that link, that gets you to some videos that you can watch. And all of these have transcriptions and translations. The philosophy behind these videos, which were, it's a project made by Alice Taft, was directing the project, and she did an amazing job. But one of the things, we had a lot of one-on-one recordings, like, hey, tell me a story, right? But basically, if we thought of English, where it's like every time you told a story, you launched into iambic pentameter, and you got heavily metaphoric, like every single time you told a story, right? And like, not like what happened to you yesterday, but like if you told like this important story of whatever, George Washington, right? But you had this, and if you said, okay, we're going to teach people English using Shakespeare or using, that's how we're going to, and so that's the problem with Tlingit is we would use a lot of oratory, and we still do. I do all the time. So you're going to learn from this because this is the best. But you really elevate your language when you're doing oratory. And it's wonderful to have so many recordings, but there wasn't a whole lot of what do two people do when they just sit down. And so what Alice tried to do, which is she saw to Tlingit me, is to capture fluent speakers just having conversations. And you know, whenever the camera is there, it's like right there. So it's always a little bit, you know, it can always be slightly invasive, but there's some wonderful conversations on it. And there's one down here, the one with George Ramos, and there's ones with there's one with him and Walter Sobola, Shwindi, which is just amazing. Kajakti. It's right here, number 54. And there's another one with, okay, let me just, here. So it's number 16. And we'll watch a little bit of this, just the beginning, because what's happening is Kehinak wanted to sit down with Walter Sobola Kajakti, who was, I think, 101 at the time that this was made. And just a really like super old school Tlingit, to the point where like, and there's just, you know, cultures are different, and a friend was going to have a baby, so they had all these speakers together, and they're like, hey, let's collect phrases for having a baby. And he got kind of mad and laughed. He's like, this is what women should be talking about, and he just like laughed. And so it's just kind of this older way of thinking, but his Tlingit was like, he would say some things that sometimes I was like, wow. And other people say, wow, you never hear that anymore, this older way of talking. So Kehinup, who's on the right, is getting his notes ready, because he wanted to ask him about names, and clan history of the Juneau area. And you can watch these whole videos, they're amazing. And so I think he's just sitting there, and he starts telling a story. And he's already into the story when they hit the record button. It's like, oh my, you know, it's something awesome. And so on the phone, you just have to catch this one on your own later. It'll be pretty short though. We'll just watch this part.
وتعسوا أي أخذ قاوي خوات وأخذ سيأكل دخوا أو الحق نكت اسمك قاوي يأخذ نوش نكت تاكل أو أدخل أخذت جاي خير خطوتي أو نبتوي يا أصيخ خشيكوك أصيخ إنك خشيخ يحفظني كخوة فشكرانا خشيك إذا خير أصيخ خوتي كيف كنت أخذت كل أنا خواك خليكي تدري يخوض روشي كنت أخسوان خطب بيسا أكخط خوشي كودوشي جتار تكت خيط خواك خوشي نكتي تكشو أنا أصبح أول أستطيع يستنب أستطيع خواتي نكاك تف أستطيع يشخى أستطيع كادية في Okay.
Thanks. So that story is about...
They imitate Tlingit chickens.
Well, I think that line, I looked at that line too, and I think the way I was translating it was, you see them always doing this. It's a war dance around chicken. That's what I thought he was saying, right? And that's because if you go inland especially, they still talk about grouse dancing. You're supposed to get up there and find a wife and dance real hard. So, yeah, a lot of fun stuff that's happening. So, the origin of Tlingit dancing. All right, let's do some of these phrases. We're run out of time. Battery's getting done. So we're just going to run through some of these. I might stop to explain them, but there's audio, there's video for these, but this is a chance to just go through this text and start internalizing some of these phrases. There's so many of them that you can just start using on a daily basis, and to the point where you got to make little flashcards, If you want to, there's probably a project out there for somebody that wouldn't be too hard to make. I started making flashcards that you can put on an iPhone or some sort of smartphone or whatever. And it wouldn't be too hard because most of the audio is there for a lot of these phrases. All right. Wasa'iyati.
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 And sometimes you'll say wasa'iyati.
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 So the sus part is a contraction of this word se, which is sort of like really softening the thing. It's like saying, maybe tell me how you're doing, but if you don't want to, don't. So it's just sort of softening it a little bit. Wasa'ituati.
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 Now that one, it could mean like, how are you doing? Like tu is inside, tuati. But it can also translate to what do you want, right? And so that one, you want to sort of be aware that a lot of people would interpret that as what do you want, right? And so they might tell you something later, and then it might be somewhat surprising. So, wasa'iyati is a safer sort of how are you doing type of thing, and that's how it's been explained. Kesh wasa'chatute. Kesh wasa'chatute. So the literal translation of this one would be, it would be, that's not how I am. Kesh wasa. So kesh, there's something going on here where the kesh wasa khat ote. So that ote is the negative form of yati. Yati means to be, right? Like, for example, someone might say something like, you're being kind of stubborn. And now it's, yeah, khat yati, that's how I am, right? And but you say kesh wasa, kesh khat ote, that's not how I am. But this is saying kesh wasa khat ote. But even though that's what it literally means, it translates to I'm okay. Right? I'm okay. And then the short version is keshwasa,
Keshwasa.
keshwasa,
Keshwasa.
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 To back up to that last one, when you look at that khat, that means me. But when it's low tone like that, it means it's an object pronoun. It's connected to that verb. Keshwasa ote.
Keshwasa ute.
Keshwasa ote.
Keshwasa ute.
So that's he or she or it is okay. Khat yake,
Khat yake.
khat yake,
Khat yake.
khat yake.
Khat yake.
So if we look at that khat, what can we notice about it?
Flat.
It's low tone, right? So there's no high tone, so that's also an object pronoun. I am the thing that is okay. There are some elders who told me this could be taken as like, I'm good, yeah. So we gotta be sort of careful with it. That's why I generally say yake works better. But in the context of someone says, how are you doing? You're probably not saying I'm a super awesome individual. Right? Usually they're saying, I'm good, things are good. Wasa yati ish.
Wasa yati ish.
Wasa yati ish.
Wasa yati ish.
So we see in parentheses, anything could be substituted in there, right? How is your mom? How's your dad? How's your grandpa? How's your kid? And so this is just getting into more sort of details. If you know somebody's kid was sick and you see them, wasa yati yati, wasa yati yi. As we start learning these kinship terms, which we're going to, we see these different sentences that they can be plugged into. And, so we go through a lot of stuff, but the key is to pick out some of these that are interesting to you, that you want to start using, and then start learning where you can fill in the blanks. And then fill in the blanks. Ach ish yake,
Ach ish yake.
ach ish yake,
Ach ish yake.
kesh ushke,
Kesh ushke.
kesh ushke.
Kesh ushke.
That specifically means bad, right? Bad. Kesh ishke is how you say you are bad. In this case, you want Michael Jackson. Kesh ushke, kesh wasa kesh ushke, yisaku ushke. Okay, that's that. Neshku,
Neshku.
neshku,
Neshku.
neshya,
Neshya.
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 So there's a couple things we can say about this. One is nesh can be a noun, which means a home. Ach neshi, my home is over there. But nesh can also be a directional term. In this case, it means come inside the building or the room. So if someone was at the door, this is what you'd use. It means come inside. Wherever I am, come inside that space. The other thing is go would be the singular form, yet would be the plural form. There are a number of verbs that change depending on whether there's one or multiple. Walking, sitting, standing, thinking, talking, flying. Those are the ones that come to my mind. And so you just sort of keep those in mind Because, and sometimes we use these different verbs, and I tease people because I want them to start conjugating. But there'd be a group of us, and then one person's leaving, and they turn and they say, "Ich secha, I love you." And I'm like, which one? Me? Because you'd say, "Ich secha, I love y'all." Right? So these are just little things that we'll just start paying attention to. So you gotta look and say, how many people are there? Okay. Y'all come in. Or maybe you say, you come in, everybody else stands. Haku.
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 Hatya.
Hatya.
Hatya. So that one means come here. My daughter, she's 15 months now. She's learns how to say haku, so she says haku now. I'm very excited. And it means come here. So we talked about these 4 sets of spaces. Ya is right here. He is here. We is there. And you is way over there. There's a 5th one, which is in this same area, which is ha. It's the area around us all, right? So haku would mean come over to wherever I am, right? Or to people might. And that's the one you're seeing here. The other place you might see it is in pu'ik, potlatch, when they call somebody's name, you're supposed to yell out, "Hade!" They call your name out to give you something. You yell out "Hade," which means over here. It's a really short command form, which you wouldn't use in too many places outside. After ones there. Wait, we'll pick up from here tomorrow. We'll keep going through these. We'll go through your guys' words. And then you give me your new set of words on Monday. Right. Chief.
What are the days of the week?
What's that?
What are the days of the week?
Oh, yeah, there's Sunday.
Oh, like first day, second
That's
day.
it, yeah. And then it goes up, and then I think when you get to Saturday or Sunday, you have a couple different options. I must read what Sunday.
You say, so you just all have to agree that Monday is the first day of
Right, and sort of go with it. So there's certainly non-Tlingit concepts.
Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday.
Cindy cuts. Saturday.
The,
Cuts.
the young Sunday. The teenager Sunday. All right. Dia quasative.